Hello and welcome to this short video about our recent paper, Planning Ahead or Dragging One's Feet, Organizational Structure and High Growth Events. The paper is now published in Small Business Economics and it is open access, hence free to download from the link in the text box below. The author team is Antonio Martins-Neto from the World Bank in Washington, DC, and myself, Access Coad from Waseda University in Tokyo, Japan. The motivation for this paper was to investigate some ideas that were circulating among entrepreneurship scholars and practitioners. Do firms plan ahead for rapid growth events? Do they invest proactively in the corporate infrastructure they will need, or do they drag their feet and delay such investment? Inevitably, fast-growing firms need to add new management layers, but when does this happen? Are high-growth firms proactive in setting up management layers? We therefore investigate how organizational changes relate to rapid growth events. In particular, we look at how high-growth firms add hierarchical layers to the organization around the time of the rapid growth episode. We investigate two scenarios. The first scenario corresponds to planning ahead. Entrepreneurship can generally be considered to be about making investments under uncertainty. Growth requires planning, which means getting the corporate infrastructure ready for growth. Google's leaders repeatedly ask themselves, how will this work when we are 10 times or 100 times bigger? Let's not decide based on what's best now, let's decide based on what will be the best in 2 or 3 years. Another interesting quote comes from Ruchi Sangvi, VP of Operations at Dropbox. Don't look for the perfect person for the job for the next 10 years, the unicorn. The company is changing so quickly that you only know what you need now. So look for people who are perfect for the next 3 years. Yet another interesting quote comes from the book on blitzscaling by Reid Hoffman and Chris Yeh. The situation is made worse when those founders wait until the strain on the organization has become unbearable before making the new hires. According to the first scenario, growing firms will proactively add a hierarchical layer at the start of the growth period. This is shown by the red line in the graph. Then we have scenario 2, which is about dragging one's feet. Now, rapid growth is hard to predict. Adding a hierarchical layer may take time because of all the usual lags in decision making, convincing stakeholders, the time needed for hiring, and perhaps also time spent in procrastination. There is empirical evidence that firms' sales growth comes before employment growth. Therefore, we might think that new hires are added at the end of the growth period, as shown by the red line in this graph. Fortunately for us, there is a standardized definition of a high-growth firm that is well known and widely used by organizations such as the European Commission, the OECD, and the World Bank. A firm is a high-growth firm if it has an average growth rate of at least 20% per year over a 3-year period. The precise formula is shown here. Furthermore, there is the condition that the firm must have 10 or more employees at start, because the definition does not wish to include micro firms in the category of high-growth firms. This study uses the RAIS database for the period 2003 to 2019. RAIS is the employer-employee census of all formal workers in Brazil. Most of the analysis is for 2011 to 2019, but we also have robustness checks for 2003 to 2011. We focus on establishments that have at least 10 employees. In the majority of cases, firms have only one establishment, so an establishment usually corresponds to a firm. We have data on a number of workers' characteristics such as workers' gender, age, tenure in months, monthly salary, and hours worked. At the establishment level, we have data on legal form, 4-digit sectors according to the CNAE, and address details. We also have detailed information on the firm's number of employees and the workers' occupations in terms of a 4-digit CBO code. In our final sample, we have over 3 million observations. Our methodology combines matching with difference in difference regression. Matching is done to ensure the control group resembles the treatment group, according to number of layers, size, 2-digit industrial sector, and state. The dependent variable y corresponds to the number of layers. The variable t is our treatment indicator, equal to 1 if there is a high growth period. We also include time to event dummies. The coefficients beta k correspond to the differences in number of layers for treated versus non-treated firms from 3 years before to 3 years after. Our main results are in figure 4 shown here. The high growth period is from 2013 to 2016. For the years 2011 to 2013, there is hardly any difference between high growth firms and the control group of non-high growth firms. Once the high growth period starts, from 2013 to 2016, then high growth firms keep adding new hierarchical layers until 2016 when the growth period ends. We can think back to our two scenarios. Being proactive shown here on top, or dragging one's feet and delaying shown here on the bottom. We see that the results do not correspond to either of these two benchmark scenarios, but seem to be somewhere in between. Another way of looking at things is shown in this graph. Here we look directly at the number of managers in firms on the left and the share of managers in firms on the right. On the left, the results are similar to our baseline analysis regarding the number of hierarchical layers. The biggest difference is probably that the graph shown here on the left shows that the number of managers keeps increasing from 2016 onwards. Interestingly, the graph on the right shows that the share of managers reaches a trough at the end of the growth period, after which it rises. This ties in nicely with research on firm growth that emphasizes the importance of managers for planning and executing growth. These results suggest that managers are relatively abundant before the start of the growth process, but that the share of managers decreases during the growth process. The share of managers reaches low levels at the end of the growth period before increasing later on. This intriguing finding that the share of managers is at its lowest at the time of the end of the growth period is consistent with ideas that a bottleneck to sustained growth is the availability of managerial attention. We also have some interesting results regarding whether new managers are promoted from within or hired from outside. A problem with these simple results is that they are descriptive associations but not causal effects. Let's keep that limitation in mind as we observe this graph. During the high growth episode from 2013 to 2016, there is a rising share of new managers being promoted from within compared to being hired externally. This result is strongest for smaller firms, shown with the blue line, but also visible in the case of large firms, shown with the red line. And that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching, and for further details please check the paper available at the link below. Have a nice day.